from 17 once again, introducing you to my Asura's Wrath hard difficulty video walkthrough. This is chapter 17, Feet of Clay. This is the second to last chapter of the standard campaign. For anybody wondering, I will be doing the DLC content as well. It's not too long and it's really fun and interesting, so do look forward to that. But a lot of this is pretty much just, you know, shooting on this crazy craft with the Asura and then a couple of Deus fights. And the Deus fights are probably the only bit that I really need to talk too much strategy on. For the rest of it, it'll just be me and my girlfriend talking more nonsense about things that we've done this week or that we plan to do and all that kind of good kind of stuff. And fingers crossed you won't cough through this one.
I'm gonna try.
As I do a sniffle, which is equally as offensive on a microphone, but I'll let myself off because it came out of nowhere. But what else have I been watching?
Watching
Trash music channels.
Candyman.
You want to talk about Candyman?
Might as well.
So, to give you a little backstory, Danielle doesn't like horror films. She doesn't like any scary type films at all, and because I am a loving boyfriend, and I'm also the guy who was completely desensitized as a child to every kind of conceivable horror film thanks to my sister and her inappropriate behaviour. That doesn't mean she touched me. That just means that she used to rent obscenely unsuitable films and force me to watch them with her because she used to get scared, so she used to use me as a shield, and I just kind of absorbed it all and, you know, lived in fear and turmoil for far too long. But I've grown to appreciate them now as I've got older, and I'm hoping to try and, you know, do the same to my girlfriend to make her appreciate the state of being in fear, or at least the tension and the nerves that comes with these kind of films. Because I do think it's very empowering, and it is enjoyable, even though I don't really, you know, get that feeling anymore, because, you know, films aren't as scary as they used to be, which might have something to do with the fact that I'm older. But I was looking on a rental service where we can watch things much like Netflix, and I noticed Candyman was on, and I remember being told about Candyman when I was really young, and he sounded really scary. And when I watched the film myself, it was scary when I was younger, but when I watched it when I was older, I realised it wasn't just a slasher flick. It wasn't just a pointless, brainless, you know, stab 'em. It actually had some interesting story points to it, and there was a little bit of mystery, some mystique. So I decided to pop it on, and we watched it. And what did you think?
I didn't like it.
Do you care to elaborate on that?
I don't like scary films, and so you put a scary film on. I wanted to watch Matilda. Candyman is definitely not like Matilda.
No, it's not, but it's not that far off. There's lots of kids in it, there's occasional murder. There's no Danny DeVito.
There isn't. No, really, it wasn't as bad as I expected, and I didn't have a nightmare, which makes me sound like a child, but I expected that I was going to have a nightmare, so...
It's not as visual as you'd think, though, is it?
No, it wasn't.
It's a lot more tasteful.
It was tense. And I didn't like the ending, so...
Yeah, the ending's bad.
It kind of... At that point, I was a bit deflated, because it didn't end how I thought it was going to end.
I couldn't remember what the ending was, but I didn't remember it being that bad. Like, yeah. The whole replacing him and... Oh.
In Candyman 2, is she...
No, she's... I believe she's barely mentioned. But then again, a lot of the heritage of Candyman is kind of lost in the second and the third one, because they turn them into slasher films. So it's... Instead of not seeing things and leaving it to imagination, it's full-on eviscerations and all that kind of good stuff. Which is good if you like the character, because I personally think Tony Todd as Candyman is fucking awesome. One thing I did notice, and you noticed as well, the audio quality was terrible on that film.
Yeah, was it because it's old and they've transferred it to that kind of digital thing? Or?
I don't know. I don't know if it's analog going to digital and it's just not crossing over very. But Candyman's voice had been synthesised, hadn't it? But it'd been done so badly that you couldn't tell what he was saying.
So half the time it was...
There was a lot of static.
Because it was really low and really staticky.
Yeah.
It was a bit difficult.
Super high on the interference, and just the like the dialogue, it's almost as if none of it had been ADR'd, and the dialogue that they did have, it had a hum to it, so the audio quality was just, it was very low, and then juxtaposing that with really loud music.
Loud, scratchy, staticky music.
Yeah, it were. I know it's kind of a budgeted release at the time, because I know it's not, you know, Hollywood millions, but it stood out, because I've watched films from the 70s and from the 60s, and the music and the sound sounded a lot better than that film, so I'm not too sure why. But we watched a couple of things, I say we checked a couple of things out on IMDb, and the scene in it where the Candyman is covered in bees, and so is Helen's face, and they're in his mouth and everything, they're actually real bees.
Oh, that makes me like shiver.
Yeah.
Because it also said that the actress who played Helen, was allergic to bees as well.
Yep,
it did. To take on that sort of scene, knowing that, although the stingers, didn't it say they were like really new bees, so the sting wasn't as strong?
Well, they were only, what were it, 6 hours old or something. They were extremely young bees that had been bred to literally do this scene because they can't sting you.
Oh, no, didn't it say they could, but it wasn't as powerful?
No, it said it couldn't couldn't physically harm you, the sting.
Well, that's alright, because I was going to say, even if it was just like, oh, it'll not hurt as much, if you get stung by that many bees.
Well, it's just like Tony Todd, the only thing stopping him from going down his throat were a mouth guard. Which, don't get me wrong, I don't mind bees at all, I actually quite like bees, but I wouldn't want them in my mouth. No. And that scene's really good, it's you know, it's affecting because you look at it and your first instinct is that's got to be CGI, but then you realise it's like 92 or whatever year it came out, so CGI back then were Terminator 2 excluded, it was kind of shitty, Jurassic Park excluded, but the average stuff is trashy, and that looks really good. But I don't know, as far as a horror film goes, I think if kids watched it today, it probably wouldn't have the same effect on them, because we're kind of being bred as a culture to visually represent things now.
I was going to say, I think if it had been the same film but with more slash and gore, then it would still be scary for kids now. But I think because a lot of it was suggested and most kids now are thick as shit,
yeah,
they just wouldn't see the correlation between, oh, that's scary because they're saying that could happen.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we didn't see that happen, so...
But that is definitely a sign of the culture that we've got now, because if you look into films in the early 90s and in the 80s, they left a lot to your imagination. They insinuated what was about to happen, but you didn't see it. Nowadays, you see everything, and kids are getting to the point where if they don't see it, they don't know that they're supposed to be afraid. Like, it's a case that if the guy isn't wearing a hockey mask and has a giant knife covered in blood, how do we know not to fear him? It's like that binary thing. But I've got to speak about the gameplay because you've just seen 2 Deus fights and I've not said anything. The strategy for Deus is kind of interesting. You need to try and farm as many of these moments as you can from him, but it can be really difficult to do. The thing I like to do is I like to lure him into doing the jump attack so I can avoid it and then I can attack him. But you need to be really careful because if you don't knock him up after the first punch, he will combo you and do massive damage, and I think you saw him do something similar in the Yasha fight. So be very, very careful with this guy. He's one of those bosses that he's going to take you a while just to learn how to avoid his attacks, how to, you know, predict his attacks, and he can be a massive pain in the ass. But do you think horror films are changing for the better or for the worse?
I've seen like 2, so I'm not really.
Yeah, but you know, just from what you've seen.
Knowing.
Yeah, just as an outsider, because if anything, you're probably a better spokesman than me, because I'm deep.
I think in some they've sort of split, because you've got the kind of the one that springs to mind, even though it's probably not really considered horror, would be Saw. And
oh, it's considered horror.
The first one's really smart.
Yeah.
Although it is kind of gory, obviously they get gorier, but.
Yeah, but they got gory because that's pretty much all they had.
Yeah, but that was intelligent. It was kind of the thinking man's horror, or whatever people say. And then the other side of really slashery, silly ones.
I think Saw is one of the greatest horror movies ever made. And I would defend that opinion because I think the script, I think the performances, I think the music, I think everything about that first film's flawless.
The first film.
What they did to that series is sacrilegious.
Which is why you've not let me watch any of the others.
I don't know. Second one's watchable, third one's watchable, then just stop. With a H. Stop.
Stop.
But thanks for watching, guys, and you take care now.